By 6 o'clock, the storm had barely waned. If this went on for much longer, my Nissan would be underwater before we could even get back to it. On the hour, jazzy instrumental music began wafting from the first floor, an old-timey phonograph drawing us all together to the great hall for the night's mandatory socializing. An older man with a walrus mustache and gold-rimmed steampunk glasses sat in a leather armchair by a roaring fireplace, with a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. He paid us no mind as we reached the bottom of the steps. A bevy of voices drew my attention to where a pair of wall-sized pocket doors had been opened, expanding the great hall into an adjacent room. A parlor big enough to dance in, were one so inclined. I whispered to Jerry, "Alright, before we get started, I want to make sure we're on the same page. We don't know what to expect, and we're not supposed to be here, so I think we should just tread lightly. Like a slug in a salt mine. Got it." I almost believed him, until he smacked me on the chest and exclaimed, "Hey, they got booze, that's my favorite liquid." With that, he went straight through the pocket doors. I tailed the best that I could. Leaving the great hall for the parlor felt like stepping into a different world. Judging by the decor, this was either a ladies' parlor or a room they put children in when they got too excited. The furniture, standing in stark contrast to the deep mahogany of the previous room, was pink and pastel. The ceiling was painted a mural of clouds and terrifying cherubs. Every flat surface contained arrangements of dead or dying flower bouquets. It had been decorated by an alien with no concept of humanity, or one who researched women on Wikipedia for 10 minutes before getting to work. As Jerry crossed the parlor to the spirits table below the life-size painting of a nude Venus, I took note of the other visitors. There were others dressed for the same time period, whatever it was supposed to be. The women had their hairs in updos and wore voluptuous skirts that exaggerated their proportions. The men were all in bespoke tuxedo suits. Honestly, male fashion hadn't changed that much in the last few centuries. A dark-haired boy of about 13 or 14 surveyed the bar from a safe distance, while a middle-aged woman with short gray hair kept a watchful eye on him. A couple, man and woman, stood in the corner of the parlor making silly faces while taking selfies at a statue of a baby with wings and horns. I made a mental note to avoid them for as long as possible, lest I be recruited to take photos. The girl was also there. The girl with the black ringlets and the piercing blue eyes. She briefly looked our way when we first entered, then quickly pretended she didn't. She was alongside another woman, taller, probably about a year or two older than me. They looked remarkably similar. The older one's hair wasn't quite as dark. Her eyes were not quite as blue. Her skin wasn't quite as pale. They were made from the same ingredients, but very different recipes. It wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that they were siblings. The older sister was the most anachronistic part of the evening. With black lipstick, a butterfly tattoo on her exposed collarbone, a smartwatch cuffed around her wrist. When she noticed us, she immediately gave me the universal, "The fuck are you looking at?" glare. Without asking, Jerry put a glass in my hand, then set to work on mixing another. I brought the cup up to my nose and took a whiff of something that smelled like jet fuel. "So, what's our cover story?" he said. "How about this? I'll be a fireman scientist, you can be an astronaut detective." "Oh, or you can be the sexy fireman detective and I'll be the guy who invented jeggings." I assumed we just tell the truth, more or less, leave out certain details, of course. Man, honesty's so boring. Haven't you ever wanted to be someone else for a night? I wasn't exactly sure how to answer that, but I didn't even get the chance. "Good evening, gentlemen." We both jumped, somehow. Maggie was there, standing directly behind us. Unless she teleported into place, I have no idea how she managed to sneak up on us yet again. "Cheesy crust, lady," Jerry exclaimed, clutching his chest. "Someone should put a bell around your neck." She showed no reaction other than launching into another deadpan monologue. "I trust you're paying close attention to the social hours, most important part of the evening experience. This will be your best chance for first impressions. Clues essential to solving the mystery of Bedside Manor may only appear once. You would both be wise to cooperate with your fellow investigators. Furthermore, I have it on good authority that not everyone here is exactly who they claim to be." She cracked another unnatural smile. "Besides yourselves, of course." And suddenly she just disappeared. She slinked away, presumably to share the message with the other participants. Once we were alone again, I asked, "What'd you make of that?" "I don't know," Jerry said. "But then again, I haven't really been following the narrative here. what exactly is the mystery of Bedside Manor? I think maybe that's what we're supposed to find out. Like, maybe the mystery is, what is the mystery? It's a little too meta for my taste. Jerry slammed his entire drink in one go and handed me the empty glass, burped, and then took the full one out of my other hand. Maybe the murder's supposed to happen before dinner. That's why she wanted us here, so that we're all suspects. Well, that's silly. How are we supposed to be investigating a murder before it happens? The call to action isn't supposed to precede the inciting incident. The frame of the story is all out of whack. Or maybe not. Maybe I've just been paying too much attention. Honestly, real life has gotten so strange lately, it made fiction obsolete. Jerry sipped his drink, smacked his lips, and said, "I stand corrected. That is too meta for my taste." I waved at the room with my empty glass. You don't find any of this weird or suspicious? Everything is weird or suspicious. That's what makes it fun. Look, I know you're nervous. I know you're used to situations getting out of hand real fast, but we're on vacation. Let all of that behind us. Let's go mingle with the nerds who actually paid for the murder mystery package. Pretend we're normal 1800s aristocracy or whatever. Eat the rich people food, drink the rich people booze, and have a good time. If shit hits the fan, we take our free suits and duck out. Damn. He didn't realize it, but Jerry slipped and showed his hand. This trip may have ostensibly been about my own mental health, but he was right. We were on vacation. I spent so much time on high alert, waiting for the next shoe to drop, that I completely overlooked the fact that Jerry had experienced his own fair share of tragedy. When our friends died, when nobody believed what really happened, when we had to swallow the official cover-up, he was right there with me every step of the way. Maybe I was being a little selfish, overreacting to a few ominous coincidences. Maybe Jerry had the right idea. After all, what good would panicking do all the way out here when no one can help us or even hear us scream? Okay, I said. I'll try to dial back the paranoia a couple of notches. But can you promise me one thing? Sure, anything. What is it? Don't leave me alone tonight, okay? Okay, I promise. Hello, gentlemen, greeted the man as he approached. He was one of the selfie couple, tall, well-built, with some light scruff around his smile. His blonde hair was combed back into a sort of mullet style that, surprisingly, did not work for him. He offered his hand, the one that wasn't holding an empty glass, and introduced himself. Tobias Kincaid. I shook his hand. Jack. But that's my real name. I don't know if we're supposed to be in character for this part or... Tobias is my real name. Blame my parents. Jerry took his hand and curtsied. Jeremiah Cumberbatch, oil prospector, saloon salesman, at your service. Tobias gave a friendly laugh. You know, I've never actually done one of these things before. I'm not exactly sure of the etiquette. All I know is I'm glad that there's an open bar. He spoke with an air of confidence, like a politician at a fundraiser. The kind of cool guy sang-froid that I could only dream about. The other half, a slim woman with long red hair and green eyes, came up behind Tobias, put an arm around his waist and planted a kiss on the cheek. Who are you new friends? She asked in a voice that contained a faint accent I couldn't quite place. Gentlemen, this is my wife, Bridget. She flashed us a perfect supermodel smile and canned, "How do you do?" Bridget, meet Jack and Jeremiah. Jerry launched into a greeting in a strange accent of his own. Well met, my lady. If it doth pleaseth the court, you may call me Jerry by love. 'Tis a lovely party, isn't it? I attempted to nip this in the bud before it gave everyone a tension headache. Jerry, you don't have to do the old-timey voice. Nobody else is doing it. Dothn't I? Egads, governor. No, now you're just doing Cockney. Bridget laughed and politely said to her husband, "It looks like you may have finally found someone to indulge in your vice alongside you." Jerry was quick to respond, "I don't know what you guys are talking about, but consider me very interested." Tobias poured himself a glass of scotch and took a sip, and said, "Well, as fortune would have it, our suite came up with a complimentary box of Monte Cristo No. 3s. Rarely does life afford us a rainstorm, fine scotch, good company, and quality cigars at the same time. It would be a pity to waste such an opportunity. Can I tempt either of you to join me for a quick smoke?" Jerry made a face that literally was active with pain. He said, "I'd love to, but as misfortune would have it, I recently quit smoking tobacco." "Oh," Tobias said. "You traded your addiction for chewing tobacco? Seems like kind of a lateral move." I answered for him. You picked up the emphasis on the wrong word there. Oh, I see, Tobias said with a nod. How unfortunate. Jerry squinted and asked, You're not a cop, are you, Tobias? Tobias and Bridget shared a hearty laugh. Man, this couple really liked to laugh. No, nothing like that, just a boring old research consultant. Jerry turned to Bridget. What about you? Just a boring old housewife. Well, gentlemen, Tobias said, holding up a glass, here's a toast to new friends. The four of us clinked our glasses together. Jerry and Tobias drank while Bridget and I watched. Shortly after, the couple excused themselves. Jerry stared hard as they walked away. Man, he said, those two are absolutely freaking gorgeous. They were also lying, I said. I couldn't explain how or why, but I knew they were hiding something. Jerry didn't seem to hear me. It sucks that the beautiful ones are always taken. You know, the concept of monogamy was created and perpetuated by the ruling class as a means of social control if humanity were to... I'm sure he was going to say something he thought was deep and/or philosophical, but thankfully, fate sent us an interruption. As Bridget went to speak with the woman with the short hair, Tobias branched off toward the great hall. The young boy, who had been wallflowering under his mother's gaze, took the opportunity to slip away, bumping into Tobias in the process. It was quick, but not quick enough to escape our notice. The kid just lifted Tobias' wallet like a pro. Jerry took a step forward. Wait, I said. What happened to Slug in a salt mine? We don't want to cause a scene here. It's cool, dude. I'll be subtle as fuck. I had no desire to see what subtle as fuck looked like in practice. But as soon as he marched in, I fell back and looked for a shadow to fade into while the whole thing blew over. Maybe we'll get lucky, I thought. Maybe Jerry will say or do something just embarrassing enough that we could use it as an excuse to leave the party early, but not embarrassing enough to get us kicked out into the rain. I blinked. Where the hell am I? In front of me I saw the bookshelf. Then I realized I had done it again. I'd zoned out, I'd lost time. I'd had to face the facts. These things were starting to become a pattern. My doctor was so optimistic that we had finally nailed down the perfect prescription cocktail to keep my brain on track. I'd pulled out my phone to assess the damage. 6:15. Nothing too bad. Just a few minutes. Surely I couldn't have gotten into too much trouble in this little time. I let myself relax, looked back to the parlor. I tried to retrace my steps. I must have come out of there to get away from all of those people. I turned back to the bookshelf and noticed one right away. The one with the faded cover. The same book the girl with the blue eyes had been reading. I pulled it out and I flipped to the first page. I read the title, The Mansion of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. Strange, I thought. I had never heard of this one before. I was certain that I had read everything Lovecraft had written. Something scurried between my feet. I looked down, but it was gone and nowhere to be seen. Well, don't just stand there. Come over here and sit a spell. The voice came from an older gentleman, the one with the walrus mustache. He was seated in the leather armchair by the fireplace, smiling in my direction. I looked around hoping he may have been referring to somebody else, but the only one in proximity was me. I'm sorry? I said. Don't be afraid. He laughed, flames dancing in the reflection of his sunglasses. It gave me the impression of a fiery-eyed demon. He showed his teeth. I don't bite. With some hesitation, I put the book back where it belonged and walked over, took the armchair opposite his. This was inevitably going to be an awkward conversation. I had always found small talk to be like running through wet sand, exhausting and in most cases completely unnecessary. Hi, I said. That sure is a nice fire, huh? He smiled in silence, giving me nothing to work with. My name is Jack. Nathaniel Pennyworth Chumley III at your service. I knew you were there. I could hear you walking over. Tell me, is there anything of interest in that corner of the room? With an ivory cane that had been resting between his lap, he pointed at the bookcase. That's when I realized that the man's sunglasses weren't strictly a stylistic accessory. Mr. Chumley, it seemed, was blind. Just a bunch of books, nothing you'd be interested in. I regretted the words as soon as they came out of my mouth. I see, Nathaniel Pennyworth Chumley III said with a hearty chuckle. And what about over there? He pointed back toward the parlor. Is there anything in that direction worth experiencing? help a poor man out. Would you describe to me what I'm missing?" "Well, there's a bunch of people." "People? How exciting. Young people or just more old folks like me?" "Well, there's Maggie Bedside, who I assume you've met." He grunted in affirmation. "Then there's a mother with her son of about 13 or so. There is a married couple. The wife is a redhead. The husband looks like MacGyver. Not that you would know what MacGyver was. Never mind. There's also my idiot genius roommate, Jerry, and 2 sisters close to my age." "Wow," he said. "And not one of those people strike you as more worthy of your attention than the books on the shelf?" "It's true what they say, youth is wasted on the young." I wasn't expecting a soft lecture tonight. I squirmed in my seat and took a stab at defending myself, though I resented the fact that I'd even have to. I'm not very good at socializing. Truth be told, I'd rather sit in the corner alone and engage in meaningless conversation with people I don't even know or care about. Again, I regretted the words as soon as they came out of my mouth, just a moment too late. I hadn't meant to be so honest. He furrowed his brow, and I backtracked quickly, which is to say, I never know how to talk to strangers. Yes, exactly the right amount of honesty. "What does a polar bear weigh?" "Excuse me?" "I asked you, what does a polar bear weigh?" I searched my memory for context and did some quick math. If I had a guess, I'd say in the neighborhood of 450 pounds? He chuckled. "Enough to break the ice, Jack." "What?" "That's what you say when you want to start a conversation. Now why don't you go try it with that girl?" "Which one?" "The one staring at you right now." I turned to see the girl with the blue eyes, watching me from across the parlor. This time it was me who turned away first. "How did you know she was looking over here?" "Some things are so obvious you don't need eyes to see them." He smiled suspiciously. "Wait, no. That answer doesn't make sense at all. Seriously? Am I supposed to believe that you could hear her smiling at me from another room? No, I'm gonna need you to explain yourself." Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. But instead, I shook my head for no good reason and said, "Okay." Mr. Chumley III held out his empty glass. "I hate to be a bother, but could I trouble you for one more favor?" "Sure," I said, standing up and taking his tumbler. "Brandy, if you don't mind. I'll be right back. Frankly, I was happy to have a task. Really, anything to get me out of having to talk to strangers." "Hi," the mother said, stepping in my path for a moment as I passed the pocket doors. "My name is Hope." Oh God, this is getting ridiculous. Did I die and go to hell? Is this my eternal punishment? Hey, I said awkwardly. "Do you know how much a bear weighs?" I'm not sure. 2 tons? Oh my God, that would be horrible. Is this riddle part of the game? She looked as flustered as I felt. "I'm sorry, I've never actually done one of these murder mystery parties before." She reached out and put her hand on my arm like we were somehow already acquainted enough to be on a touching basis. No, it was... never mind. I took a half step back and let her hand fall off of me. "What's up, Hope?" "I wanted to ask for your help. See, I'm here with my son, Wolfgang. He's a very bright boy. He's extremely talented, but he isn't the most outgoing. He's had a hard time making new friends since coming back home, and I was thinking maybe this weekend would give him a chance to come out of his shell." She raised her glass to her lips and took a large swallow. She was full of nervous energy like a squirrel in a dog park, constantly looking back to the corner of the room where the boy was now sitting by himself. I was still trying to think of a tactful way to tell her I'm not a good fit for a babysitter when she started talking again. "The other gentleman you were with, is he..." She blinked several times before finishing the sentence. "Your brother?" Yeah, something like that." She laughed like somebody had made a joke, leaned forward and put her hand back on my arm, and said, "Oh good, I wanted to make sure. I want my boy to see normal adults that he can look up to." "Lady, I can assure you, we are not normal. Hell, we're barely even adults." She laughed even harder than squeezed my arm. "You're so funny. What did you say your name was?" "Jack." Her eyes widened. Then she proceeded to drop a nuclear bomb at my feet. "Oh, Jack Townsend. That's right, I've been looking for you." I gripped the glass in my hand and prepared to use it as a weapon. This was an all-hands-on-deck, 5-alarm, freak-all-the-way-out emergency. I could feel it. Something bad was about to happen. I needed to focus on not letting the panic attack swelling up in my chest, overwhelm all of my senses. I swallowed the festering terror before it could break the surface and put on a smile, and in the calmest voice I could muster, "How did you know my last name?" Evidently, my normal act was passable enough. She took another sip of her drink and explained, "I have one of your bags in my room. Wolfgang and I were walking the grounds earlier, and when we returned, it was just sitting on the bed. A backpack full of clothes. I hope you don't mind that we went through it. I promise we were just looking for some kind of ID. There were prescription bottles in there with the name Jack Townsend. I assume one of the servants must have delivered one of the other guest luggage to your room by mistake." She covered her mouth and said, "Oh, is that okay for me to say, right? Servants? I mean, it's what they are. After all, you never know what you're allowed to say these days." "Excuse me," I said as I rushed past her, scanning the room for Jerry. I had all the evidence I needed now that this wasn't a normal feeling anymore. Something was not right. I didn't know what or who or why, but I knew that this was a situation and we were much better off not in a situation. It was time for us to go. Duck out, pull an Irish goodbye. But Jerry, like my sense of calm, was nowhere to be found. Where the hell did he go? I told him not to leave me alone. Maybe somebody already got him and I'm next. I tried to shake that thought out of my head. I needed to focus. He probably went and got a good seat at a dinner table. Yeah, that seems like something Jerry would do. There was a doorway on the other side of the parlor, which I thought led to the dining room. I dropped off Mr. What's his name again? Yeah, fuck it. Let's just call him Nathaniel from now on. I dropped off Nathaniel's glass next to the bouquet of dead flowers, went through the door and immediately realized that I had made a mistake. I was in a hallway now. At least, hallway was the best word I could think of to describe it. The space didn't go anywhere specific, just a long, narrow, straight corridor for as far as I could see. Something about the pattern of the lime green and purple wallpaper and the upward slope of the checkered floor created this optical illusion that looked like it went on forever, giving me the impression that the space was infinite, leading nowhere. It made me dizzy. This house seemed impossible. If Jerry went off on his own, there's no telling. Holy shit! The girl with the blue eyes. She was right there next to me and had the same intense look on her face. Who was she? A character? A guest? A ghost? Was she even real? What? I exclaimed. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered. "What, you mean in this hallway? What even is this? The hallway?" She said it slower. "No, I mean you're not supposed to be here, Jack." Her face told me that she was being deadly serious. Yeah, I know. "Where do you think you go when you're not here?" Amazingly, I understood her question. She was referring to my episodes. The lost time, the moments when I lose connection with my body. I've wondered the same thing. Where do I go when I'm not in my body? And more importantly, who's running the show when I'm not there? I understood the question, and yet I couldn't understand how I understood her question. I couldn't understand how Claire knew to ask that question in the first place. "Do we know each other?" I asked. "Have we met before?" Claire shook her head. "No, but this place is going to bring out the worst in you," she warned. I almost introduced myself, but then I remembered she already knew my name. Then I realized that somehow I already knew hers. Claire and I must have talked earlier. How else would she know all these things about me? How did I know that she lost both of her parents in a terrible accident almost a year ago? That she hated the cold as much as I did? That she was scared, even if she didn't show it? "They're watching us," she said. "They're studying every..." An urgent voice called out from the parlor. "Claire? Claire, where are you?" A moment later, the girl with the butterfly tattooed rushed through the doorway. She stopped when she saw us. "Oh," she said, casting a distrustful look upon me. "Is everything okay out here?" I waited for Claire to answer, but she didn't say anything. She didn't even acknowledge the other person in the hallway with us. Eventually, I cleared my throat to try to defuse the situation. "Yeah, everything's fine. We're just talking." They were both staring at me now. The older one's eyes felt like daggers. I tried a different tactic. "Hey, do either of you guys know how much a polar bear weighs?" The girl with the butterfly tattoo grabbed Claire by the shoulders and turned her away so they were facing each other. In a soft voice, she said, Claire, will you please go back to the party? I'll be right in there, okay? Claire didn't answer, or at least didn't answer to her. She turned back to me and said, "Follow the smoke." With that, she went back into the parlor, leaving me alone with the older sister. "Hi," I said. "Jack." "Lauren." She had the aura of a shark who smelled blood. "Nice to meet you, Lauren." "No, it isn't." She crossed her arms. "Are you a vegetarian, Jack?" No. Good. Before I could process what was happening, Lauren had already grabbed my shoulder. She pulled me towards her and put a cold knife against my cheek. "Now listen here, you little shit. If you bother my sister again, I swear to Christ I'll cut off your dick and feed it to you. Understand?" I carefully thought about my answer, eventually settling on a non-threatening, "Yes, ma'am." She held the weapon there for what seemed like a tiny eternity, before releasing her grip and lowering the blade. I stayed perfectly still as she stepped backwards. She never looked away from me as she folded up the butterfly knife with a well-rehearsed flourish. She slid it back into her glove and put a finger on her lips, and then back through the doorway into the parlor. A second later, I remembered how to breathe. Okay, I thought. That almost definitely wasn't part of the game. I would like to say thank you to all the lovely, lovely supporters who keep this channel running. I cannot thank you guys enough. There is a backlog of stories on the Patreon. I am going to start updating there as soon as I get some extra time. I am literally recording this a couple hours before this goes live. It's Friday morning before I go to the gym, so it's fun. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and do all that. And I hope you enjoy.